I woke up in the hospital bed feeling the sharp pain in my head, then noticed the bandage. I'm confused. I have no memory of what happened to me. My boyfriend Tom walks in. "You're finally awake. How are you? Does it still hurt?" he asks, looking concerned. "My head hurts," I said. "Wait, I'll call the nurse." He rushes outside, calling the nurse. The doctor and nurse come in moments later, and I ask Tom what happened and how I got here. Tom turns to the doctor as if asking what's wrong with her. "Short memory loss is common for head trauma. Don't worry, you'll regain it in no time," the doctor explains. I ask Tom what really happened. He says that I tripped coming down the stairs, then changed the topic right away. I was discharged not long after, and we went straight home. Tom's actions bothered me. He didn't have much to say. It seemed like he was hiding something. The next day, Tom had an emergency meeting and had to go to his office. "This will be quick. I'll be back right away," he said as he drove away. I went into the house and start to fix some lunch. I notice a bracelet on the shelf in a cabinet. It was my best friend's bracelet. Confused about why it was there, I decided to give her a call, but she wasn't answering. I then called her boyfriend and asked if he knew where she was at. "I thought she was with you. She told me 2 days ago that she'd be spending the week there," he said. "She's not here, and I just got out of the hospital," I explained. "Call me if you get in touch with her," he asked worriedly. "I surely will." The call ended. It made me worry. Melissa is not the type of person that will just disappear like that. She's a good person, a good friend. I decided to go help look for Melissa. I hurried upstairs to get my bag, but to my surprise, I found pictures of Tom and Melissa together inside my bag. What is this? They were together alone. I got up and decided to look through Tom's laptop since he had left it behind. I saw a bunch more pictures of Tom and Melissa together. I was in tears now. "How could you?" I shout angrily. I am so heartbroken. Melissa has been my friend for nearly 10 years. I never imagined her doing this to me. I was crying my heart out when I remembered that Melissa was missing. Her boyfriend told me that she was supposed to be here, but she's not. She was supposed to be with me on the day of the accident. Then I remembered Tom acting suspicious. I start to search everywhere for possible clues. What happened to Melissa? I catch a glimpse of something in the trash and was shocked. I found a bloody piece of fabric. Now I'm starting to get very scared. I start searching everywhere, and then I found high-heeled shoes hiding in the cabinet. Those aren't mine. I think they might belong to Melissa, I thought. I hurriedly gather all the evidence and put it inside a big plastic bag. I will take it to the police station. But when I was about to get out, I got a text from Tom that he was almost home. I got really scared and decided to just put everything back and pretend to not know anything. Did he do something to Melissa? I passed by the basement door and heard a ringing. I took a few steps back and listened for the ringing. It was coming from the basement. I was so scared to go down, but I did it anyway. Was that Melissa's ringtone? Was she down there? I open the door and slowly walk down the stairs. I hear the cell phone ringing, much louder now. I follow the sound, and that led me to our old cabinet. The ringing stops. Silence filled the basement, and I can hear my heartbeat. I slowly opened the cabinet and screamed. Melissa in the cabinet was covered in blood, her dead staring eyes open and looking straight at me. I was shaking and crying in fear, then pulled my phone out to call 911. I was crying but stopped suddenly. 911, what is your emergency? The woman in the other line said. I just stared straight at Melissa's dead eyes. I click end call, straightened up, and composed myself. I burst into laughter. I remember it all now. I finally remember what happened. It was me all along. I knew all along that there was something between them. I tried to separate them secretly, but they loved each other. They even decided to run away together, so I planned her murder. I killed Melissa and hid her here. Later that night, I confronted Tom, and we had a fight which led him to accidentally push me on the stairs. "Hi, sorry for forgetting you here." I smiled and told her dead body. My phone rings. It's Tom. "I'm sorry. I had to go back to the office. I'll be there at dinner time. I am so sorry." Okay, the call ended. I turned on the music and started to cook for dinner. I dance to the music and enjoy everything I'm doing. At dinner time, I made a very special candlelight dinner. Tom was so amazed and happy. Wow, what's the occasion? Am I missing something? He asks as I pour his wine. I just smiled. We made a toast, then we started eating the delicious dinner. Wow, this is delicious. He's delighted. I look at him and said, "Do you know your steak has a name?" "A name," he laughs. "Yes, Melissa."
My mother called everyone into the living room, and my sister and I grimaced as she drew the dusty picture books from the back of the shelf. I spotted a man in the background while everyone was laughing at the images of me as a big, nude infant. He wasn't somebody I knew, and I honestly assumed he was in the wrong location at the wrong time, like an unintentional photo bomb. However, there was something odd about it, as if the photo had terrible energy about it. He was in every photo, but he wasn't staring into the horizon like some random onlooker this time. He was staring at the camera, his gaze fixed on mine as if he knew exactly where I would be at this very time. This photograph was shot 12 years ago, so it must have been a strange coincidence. This startled me a little and sent a shiver down my spine, but I didn't think anything of it. I went to my old room to hide from my mother, who had taken out photographs from when I was in high school, the darkest years of my life, as evidenced by the photographs that made me want to put chilies in my eyes so I wouldn't see them again. I also began to consider the man in the photographs. I'm curious about the two possibilities of him being in the two solo photos of myself and his eyes being exactly positioned to gaze at mine when the photos were shot years ago. I never liked selfies since they made me feel awkward in high school. But just to be sure, I took one to see if this was a strange coincidence. My body froze when I saw my selfie. He was peeping from my bedroom window. I dashed downstairs and took the book from my mother's grasp. Everyone stared in disbelief as perspiration spilled across the page and my hands hurried to find my high school images. He'd reappeared. Once again. Once again. My pulse was racing as I positioned my back to the wall to take another photo of myself, wondering how he could possibly in this one if there was nothing behind me. When I glanced at the photo, he wasn't there. I exhaled a sigh of relief as I calmed myself down. The celebration had ended and I was saying my final farewell to my parents before heading home. It was 3 o'clock in the morning and I had just been driving for 2 hours. I parked at a service station to perhaps rest my eyes and began scrolling through my phone. I received an SMS from this unknown number while scrolling. When I opened it, to my amazement, it was the selfie I had shot with my back to the wall. My suspicion led me to believe it was one of my childhood pals who felt I looked silly in the photo, so I responded with a middle finger emoji. After a few minutes of browsing, I received another text from the same number. When I opened the message again, it was the same picture. However, I began to shake uncontrollably. When I zoomed in on the photo, I saw the reflection of my glasses and there was the man again. It seemed like he was in front of me when I took the selfie that afternoon. I had no idea what to do. This dude followed me through all of my photographs. As the number was sent to me, my heart began to race once again. Take another photograph. I blocked the number and resumed driving. The dread and fear kept me going all the way home, and as soon as I walked into my bedroom, I collapsed onto my bed. When I awoke, my phone had received over 100 texts from that one number. Take a picture, take a picture, take a picture. I was feeling really overwhelmed. I was at a loss for words. As my phone continued to beep on my bedside table, I curled up into a ball on my bed. Years have passed and never did I take a picture of myself again. Whenever there are events and parties, I always try to hide and avoid getting my picture taken. That way, I can escape him. When I got married, I specifically asked my husband not to take photos. He agreed and I love him for that. More years passed and it's my daughter's first day of school. It has been years since I last saw that man in the photographs. Maybe this time he'll be gone. Plus it's my daughter's special day. Maybe we can finally start collecting our photo albums. I asked my daughter to stand on our porch as I took her photo, and I almost died when I saw her picture. The man was there, hugging my daughter.
Matt had always been close to his father. His mom died when he was 10, so it had just been him and his dad for a long time. Even after he died, Matt felt like he could still talk to him. So when it was his 18th birthday and he visited his father's grave, he was excited to share the news with him. But as soon as Matt arrived at the gravesite, a tall man in all black clothing appeared out of nowhere. The man handed Matt a little black book and said ominously, "Today you're 18. It's time to begin." As Matt looked down at the book in confusion, the man disappeared into the night. Suddenly everything felt very scary and sinister. What did this mean for Matt? Was this really happening? He slowly opened the book and began to read. The first page said, "To kill someone, you first must understand them." Matt's heart sank as he realized what his father's gift really was. It was an instruction manual on how to become a murderer. As he turned the pages, he saw pictures and diagrams of different ways to kill people. There were descriptions of how to make someone suffer and die slowly, or how to quickly and efficiently end their life. Then he came to a note stuck in between pages. It read, "Matt, this book has been a curse to our family and has always found its way from father to son. You will never be able to get rid of it. You can burn it, throw it in the trash, or toss it into the sea. No matter what you try, it will always find its way back into your hands. You'll find out soon that you must do as the book instructs, or the murders will progressively get closer to you. I'm sorry I died and it had to come to you. I wish I could have saved you the pain it always brings. Dad." Matt's hands trembled as he realized the weight of what was happening. He was now part of a legacy of death and violence. There was no escaping it. The book was his fate, his destiny. He decided to head home and try to get to bed. Maybe tomorrow he'd wake up and find that this had all been a bad dream. As he was driving down the cemetery road, he looked at the book sitting on the seat next to him. Then in one quick motion, he grabbed the book and hurled it out the window. He watched in the rearview mirror as it hit the ground and tumbled over end. Nearly an hour later, he made it back to his apartment. The drive home had been good for him as it gave him some time to clear his head. He walked into his apartment, locked the door, and threw his keys onto the little table in the hallway. He froze and felt as if 1,000 spiders ran up his back and into his hair. There on the table was the black book. It had found its way back to him. The book began to shake, then glow slightly. It flung itself open, but the page was blank. Then an image started to appear. It was like someone was rapidly sketching a scene with a pencil. He recognized the scene right away. It was the Oriental Market where he often shopped. The final details started to appear. It was Zhao, the old man who worked the counter at the market. His image began to turn red and then dissolve into a red pool across the floor of the market scene. The book slammed shut and everything went black. Matt's mind reeled as he realized what the book had just shown him. He had to kill Zhao. No! He shouted at the book. He couldn't just go and kill this old man. He didn't know him very well, but he was always very friendly to Matt. He wasn't about to murder anyone. He didn't care what the book wanted or what his dad said in the note. He wasn't a murderer and would never be. He reached for the book to throw it away again, but as soon as his fingers touched the cover, he felt an electric shock. The book flew out of his hand and across the room, hitting the wall with a thud. It landed upside down and opened to the page with Zhao's image. The page was no longer blank. It now showed a scene of Matt kneeling over Zhao's dead body with blood all around them. No, he would not do it. He headed into the bathroom and took a long hot shower. He tried not to think of the book or anything else that happened that day. He got out of the shower, put on his pajamas, and got into bed. He found he was really tired and actually fell asleep right away. He woke up late the next day. The clock said 5:05, but that couldn't be possible. He could see the sun shining brightly through the curtained window. Had he slept all day? He made himself some coffee and turned on the TV. Sure enough, the 5 o'clock news was on, and it was an on-scene news report of some kind. The reporter stated, "We have been told that Susie Lee, the daughter of Zhao Li, the owner of Lee's Oriental Market, was shot and killed last night in an apparent robbery. Mr. Lee normally works the night shift at the market, but less than an hour before the robbery occurred, he began feeling ill and asked his daughter to watch the shop for a while." Matt sat down hard on the couch, spilling his coffee. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. This couldn't be happening. It must be some kind of sick joke. He turned off the TV and just sat there in shock. That poor girl was killed because I couldn't do what the book wanted. I can't kill a person, but I also can't take seeing some other innocent person die. Either way, it's my fault. He heard the voice of his father. "I told you what would happen if you didn't do as the book wants. This is just the beginning. If you don't do what the book tells you, more people will die. And the deaths will get closer to me. He looked over to where the book flew last night, but it wasn't there. He looked back to the TV and the book was right in front of him on the coffee table. It was open to the page with Zhao's image. It still wants me to kill Zhao, even though his daughter was just murdered by someone else. How am I supposed to kill him? I can't believe I'm even thinking about this. Then the book's pages began to flip and then settled open to an image of a knife block with handles of several knives sticking out. It was his very own block of knives that were on the kitchen counter. He got up and headed for the kitchen, and to his knife block. He chose one of the middle-sized knives and drew it out of the block. He went back to the couch and looked at the book. It was now showing Zhao sitting at a table and a shadowy figure was standing up behind him with the gleam of a knife in his hand. He knew that figure was himself. He was filled with fear and dread of what might happen, who the next person would be to die if he didn't do this terrible deed. He knew this kind of act had to be done at night, so he spent the next few hours pacing his house and wondering why this was happening to him. He finally decided it was time, and put on a dark hoodie. He slid the knife's blade up his sleeve so that the handle was still held in his palm. Headed out of his house into Lee's Oriental Market. He got there and saw that the place was closed up. He tried the door but it was locked. He looked through the window and saw that the place was dark inside. He pulled out his knife and used the handle to break one of the panes of glass in the door, then reached in and unlocked the door from the inside. He walked in, and made his way to the back of the store. He remembered seeing a staircase at the rear corner of the store. He bumped into a display and a bunch of cans fell to the floor. He froze. I came here to kill this man, but for some reason, I never thought about getting caught. He stood there for what felt like an hour, but he must not have been heard. Faint sounds were coming from the rear of the store where the staircase was. He proceeded more cautiously now. As he neared the stairs he could see a dim light coming from the second floor. He crept slowly up the stairs and came to a closed door at the top. The light was coming from under the door. He put his ear to the door and could hear voices inside. After listening for a minute he could tell that it was coming from a TV. Some sitcom. He could hear the audience's laughter. Then much louder laughter from someone in the room. Must be Zhao, he thought. Kind of odd to be laughing and enjoying a show when his daughter had just been murdered the night before. She's a whore just like the damn girl. Flirting with every guy that came in the store. It was Zhao. Was he talking to someone else? Her flirting didn't get her out from that idiot putting a bullet in her head, did it? Good thing I made her work last night. That could have been me. But that idiot did me a favor. I won't have to waste my time trying to beat sense into her every day anymore. Damn whore. Just like her mom. Well, I put a stop to her mom whoring around. That idiot did it for me this time. What is Zhao saying? Did he kill his wife? Did he say he was beating his daughter? Matt thought to himself all the while his own anger was building up. He found himself wanting to kill this man. He wasn't the nice man that ran the market anymore. He was evil. Matt slowly turned the doorknob and opened the door enough to see inside. It was Zhao sitting alone at a table facing away from the door and watching a TV on the far wall. Matt opened the door enough to slip inside and began to slowly stalk up behind Zhao. He pulled the knife from his sleeve, came up just behind Zhao, and as fast as a snake strike, covered Zhao's mouth with one hand, pulling him up and off the chair, stretching and exposing his neck. Something took control of Matt's voice and he spoke out loud. Li Zhao, I am death, and I have come for you. With a quick and steady stroke, slid the knife across his exposed neck and spilled his lifeblood from him. I released him, and took several quick steps back. Choa slumped back into the chair. Dead. What just happened? Something else, just took control of me. My hands, my voice. That wasn't me at all. Then suddenly I had a vision of myself wiping the knife's blade on Choa's shirt, sliding the blade back up my sleeve and quickly going down the stairs, going further to the rear of the store, through double doors, turning left at the second row of stock shelves, turning right, and running to the end where a large steel door was closed and barred. I've never been in the back of this store. Then a voice echoed in my head. Now. I immediately followed the path the vision showed me, and sure enough, came to that large steel door. I lifted the locking bar and the voice again in my head said, wait. Then a vision of slowly opening the door, going out into the alley, to the left, and a dozen steps to another door across the alley, going through that door and a long hallway out the front door onto the next street over. Without delay, I again followed the path my vision showed me, and again it was exactly as shown to me. I stepped out onto the sidewalk and began walking at a normal pace back home. I started going over what I had just done, and that force had taken me over and allowed me to do such a terrible deed, like I had done it 1,000 times before. Maybe I had, or that the being or force that took me over had, and 1,000 times was nowhere near the actual number. I had a split-second image of tens of thousands of times, and throughout hundreds, or even thousands of years. I truly had become Death himself.
My girlfriend and I had heard about the Winston Hotel, an old Victorian home that was turned into a hotel. Most people you mentioned it to would say it was haunted. We thought it would be exciting to stay in a haunted hotel for a few nights but had no idea how it would affect me for the rest of my life. When we checked and I asked if the hotel was indeed haunted, the clerk said yes and told us that it was owned by an eccentric millionaire who purchased the house after the death of its previous owners. She told us that the owner was there and he loved sharing the old stories of the hotel. She took us to the parlor where the owner was sitting and reading a book. She introduced us to him and he began sharing stories of a man who lived there in the 1800s, whose presence is still felt in a few corners of the house. We also talked about the ghosts that are rumored to haunt it, a woman who strangled her children during a fit of madness and then hung herself from the rafters. After being shown to our room, we promptly got ready for bed and snuggled under the covers together. It was already after midnight and it had been a long day. I fell asleep right away. I was startled out of sleep by a woman's scream from outside and it felt like I was in the middle of a movie. I bolted out of bed and ran to the window, quickly pulling back the curtains. "What is it?" Jenna asked. "It was just a dream. I thought someone screamed," I replied, trying to calm my nerves. "I didn't hear anything. Come get back in bed." I crossed the room and got back in bed and pulled the covers up under my chin. I could tell Jenna had already fallen back to sleep, but I couldn't. I could still hear that woman's scream in my mind. I started thinking about the stories the owner had told us earlier. Then I saw it, an apparition of a woman with long blonde hair, hanging from the rafter by her neck, with a long red scarf. The stories were true. The apparition was there and we were not alone in that room of the old house that night. I shook her. "Jenna, look," and pointed towards the window where the ghost hung swaying back and forth. Jenna said, "What?" Then Jenna screamed and the ghost disappeared. "Okay, you saw it too. So it wasn't just a dream. Maybe this wasn't a good idea," she said. I said, "It was scary as hell, but the ghost didn't try to do anything to us. It was just hanging there and then disappeared when you screamed. So we both just laid there and stared at the spot where the ghost had been. Nothing more happened, no ghosts, no screams, and we both eventually fell back to sleep. I woke up to dim, morning light coming in through the window. I yawned and turned toward Jenna, but she wasn't there. I thought she must be in the bathroom. I called out. I finally fell asleep and slept good the rest of the night. "How about you?" but got no response. I got up and walked toward the bathroom. "Jenna," I called out, but there was no answer. I walked into the bathroom to find it empty. "Jenna," I called out, but there was still no response. I walked back into the room and the old phone on the nightstand started ringing. I picked it up and the same woman's scream came from it. I slammed it down and ran out of the room and down the stairs. I went to the check-in counter and asked the clerk, the same one from the day before. "There was a ghost in our room last night. And screaming. And Jenna, did you see Jenna? She isn't in our room." "Oh, so she visited you last night," the clerk said. "Jenna? Who is Jenna?" "My girlfriend Jenna. We checked in together and stayed here together last night," I replied. "I'm sorry," she said. "You were alone when you checked in yesterday. There was no one else with you. But I remember Jenna and me coming into the house and visiting with the owner, and us going to bed together, and then us both seeing the ghost. I went back up the stairs and into our room." "Jenna," I called as I went in, but no response. I looked at the bed and noticed that the covers on the side where I slept were tossed back, but the other side was still tucked in and undisturbed. I looked around the room but seeing none of Jenna's things, no bag, no clothes. I thought, how is this possible? Then I realized that I couldn't remember anything of Jenna before walking into the hotel the day before. Jenna, with her long blonde hair and the red scarf. Oh my gosh, no, it can't be. I grabbed my things and ran out of that place. It's been 10 years since that night, and as hard as I try, I cannot forget what happened, and I still occasionally catch a glimpse of a girl with long blonde hair wearing a red scarf.
It was a usual day. I woke up feeling crappy, but nothing a cup of Diet Coke couldn't remedy. Yep, I drank soda first thing in the morning. For me, soda is coffee. I ate my cereal, got ready, and drove to school. I spent the entire day wishing for my bed. What I didn't expect was that my bed would be the last thing I wanted to come home to after this insane nightmare. At the very least, I assumed it was a nightmare. I really hoped that was a nightmare. When I came home, I dumped my bag onto the sofa and rushed upstairs, my body following suit as I flung myself face first onto what I thought was my secure, comfy bed. My consciousness soared far from my existence the moment my face met my pillow. I suddenly woke up and looked at the time. 3 o'clock in the morning. I realized I hadn't phoned or even said goodnight to my boyfriend. I just brushed it off and sent him an apology, believing things would be okay the next morning. I went downstairs to grab a drink since I was thirsty. I struggled upstairs to discover my door open when I thought I had closed it. I was still half sleepy at the time, so I didn't think much of it. I sagged back into my bed, but I couldn't sleep as easily as before. Have you ever had the impression that someone is watching you, but you know it's not true? This is how I felt. A tickle of a glare searing to the back of my brain. I faced the wall so that it was the only thing I could see, which clearly did nothing for my safety but did assist to alleviate my panic. I attempted to sleep by closing my eyes. Just as I'm ready to fall asleep, I hear the rustling of my keys on the floor and a tiny pull on the covers I'm using as a refuge. I paused and decided to curl myself like a little unborn child in my mother's womb. The sheets began to rise and the mattress began to sink under the weight of another person. Someone was climbing into my bed. Is it my mom? But she'd never do that. And then a small chuckle in a deep, ugly voice welcomed me. My eyes widened, but I couldn't bring myself to turn around. I lay in fright, sweating, till I felt a hand caress my arm and gently grip it. It gradually drew me towards the direction of the individual. It twisted me till my skull clicked into place. I was suddenly confronted with this entity, this monstrosity. Its arm was still grasping my arm, tightening with each passing second. I kept my eyes closed because I didn't want to see. I couldn't do it. Its hold on my arm became so strong that it caused my excruciating agony. I had to open my eyes and look at what was in my bed. As my eyes focused, I could see a grin practically from ear to ear, with rotten teeth hanging free from his wounded gums. His eyes were wide open, and his gaze was frenzied and bloodshot. His brow creased, and a few strands of hair stuck out from his worn scalp. I attempted to get up and out of there, but I couldn't. He was not only grabbing my arm, but he was also pulling me down into my bed. I kicked him in the crotch and ran for the front door, his heavy footsteps trailing behind me. I fumbled for the keys and slammed the door open when I noticed he wasn't following. I realized I wasn't alone in that house. My mother and brother were sound asleep, and I knew they weren't light sleepers. I calmed myself down and raced back inside, equipped with a knife from my kitchen with a rush of adrenaline. I moved up the stairs quietly, and to my astonishment, the man was standing in my younger brother's room. The door closed on my face, and I tried to tear it down with all my might. My mother was definitely awakened, and she raced out of her room to investigate what was going on, and she quickly assisted me in breaking down the door. We dashed in to discover the man on my brother's bed, simply caressing his hair and humming. The hum has turned into a snarl. That's when I thought I woke up. I was in my bed as normal. I stood up and began to open my door when I heard a faint whine followed by a growl. And the entity was there, outside my door, waiting for me to come out. I shut the door closed and I immediately woke up. Another sigh of relief, but is the dream really over? I heard another faint sound from outside, and so I opened the door and was greeted again by the entity. I shut the door and I woke up again. I am in a constant loop of fear and trepidation. Only after a few hundred rewinds did I realize that I might be in hell, not because of my sins, but because of this being who wanted to cuddle me at night.
Bobby's heart was pounding in his chest as he watched the figure in the distance. He tried to swallow, but his throat was dry. He had been looking out the window, watching the lightning when he saw it. At first, he thought it was just another shadow from the storm, but as it got closer, he realized it was something else. The figure was massive, easily twice the size of a man. It lumbered towards him, bathed in an eerie light from the lightning flashes. Bobby tried to scream, but no sound came out. He could feel himself trembling, but he couldn't move. The figure was getting closer and closer, and then suddenly, there was a crash of thunder and the figure disappeared into the darkness. Bobby let out a breath that he didn't realize he had been holding and staggered backward until he hit the wall behind him. He stayed there for a long time, until finally his fear began to fade and rational thought returned. It must have been just a tree or something else caught in the headlights of a car driving by. There was nothing to be afraid of. But even as he tried to convince himself of that, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was something out there in the darkness, watching him. He decided to turn on the TV and maybe find a funny show to watch that would get his mind off whatever it was he thought he had seen. As he turned on the TV, he noticed his hands were still shaking. He thought he'd pour himself a drink, maybe that would take the edge off. He got up from the couch slowly, feeling like he was being watched. He turned around quickly, half expecting to see the figure from before, but there was nothing there. Just the flashes of lightning and rain pelting the window. He opened the kitchen cabinet, took out the bottle of bourbon, and poured a glass. He sipped and could hear some laughter coming from the TV. The warmth of the bourbon going down and sounds from the TV were already relieving some of the tension and fear. He felt sure that what he saw was nothing more than tricks of the lights and shadows outside. But even so, he couldn't help but feel like something was still out there, waiting for him. He turned off the TV, then went upstairs to bed, bourbon in hand. As he got into bed, he thought he saw a movement outside his window. He quickly turned off the light and pulled the covers up to his chin, heart racing. He told himself it was just the branches from the tree outside moving in the wind. He lay there wide awake for a long time, and as he was just about to go to sleep he heard it. A deep rumbling growl. His eyes immediately snapped open. Had that growl he heard been real, or had he been dreaming it and the fear of it woke him up? He didn't know for sure. He was afraid to find out, but knew he would never get to sleep if he didn't find out. He slowly got out of bed, heart pounding, and cautiously made his way to the window. He slowly pulled back the curtain just enough to peek outside. And there it was. The massive figure from before was standing outside his house, bathed in the eerie light of the lightning flashes. Bobby's heart skipped a beat as he stared at it, frozen in fear. The figure's head snapped up to look directly at Bobby. An extra long lightning strike fully illuminated the thing. And Bobby saw that it wasn't just a massive figure, it was some kind of monster. It had long claws, razor-sharp teeth, and glowing red eyes. Bobby let out a scream as he stumbled backward and fell to the floor. The growl came again, but this time most definitely from inside his house. Bobby scrambled to his feet and ran for the door, but it was too late. The monster was already inside. He could hear it coming up the stairs after him, and he knew he was going to die. He slammed the door and pushed his dresser in front of it just as the monster reached it. He could hear it scratching and clawing at the door, trying to get to him. He backed up until he was pressed against the wall opposite the door, heart racing, knowing there was no way out. The monster was going to kill him and there was nothing he could do about it. Suddenly, the power went out and everything was plunged into darkness. He thought he could jump out the window. He was on the second floor and would probably get hurt falling that far, but it would be better than what that thing was going to do to him if he stayed in here. He turned to make a run for the window but felt something wrap around his leg and yank him backward.
He screamed as he felt teeth sink into his flesh, and then everything went black. He woke up to the sound of rain pelting his window. He was disoriented and confused for a moment, wondering why he was in his room. Then he remembered what happened, and it all came rushing back to him. The monster, the teeth sinking into his leg, the darkness. He tried to sit up but felt a sharp pain in his leg and realized that it was injured. He couldn't remember how he had gotten away from the monster, but he was thankful that he was alive. He looked around his room, half expecting the monster to come crashing through the door at any moment, but everything was quiet. He tried to stand up, but his injured leg couldn't support him, and he fell back down with a grunt of pain. Then the power came back on, and he could see the blood on his leg and some on the floor. He looked at the wound and saw a piece of broken glass still stuck in his leg. He carefully pulled it out and realized it was from his bourbon glass. He looked around, and sure enough, his broken glass was there on the floor near him. Then he realized the dresser was in its normal place, to the side of the door. Not where he had pushed it to when running from that thing, that monster. He opened the door and expected to find scratches on the outside, but there were none. He looked down the stairs and saw no monster, no evidence that anything had even happened. He must have been dreaming it, he thought to himself. But it had felt so real. He limped downstairs, using the banister for support, and went into the kitchen to get a glass of water. That's when he saw the muddy footprints on the floor, leading from the back door to the stairs. There were no footprints going back out, as if whatever made them had just vanished into thin air. He knew he hadn't been dreaming, something had happened. But what was it? And where did it go? Then, the ground.
Marcus walked home from school every day. He and his family just moved here a few weeks ago, and their house was only a few blocks from his school. He always walked past this old abandoned house. The kids at school said it was haunted. They dared him to go in. So, he decided to go into the house and prove that he wasn't afraid. As soon as he entered the house, he could feel a cold chill run down his spine. It felt like someone was watching him. He slowly made his way through the dark hallways, trying not to make any noise. Suddenly, he heard a loud crash coming from upstairs. He nervously went up the stairs, but when he got there he saw nothing but an old broken mirror on the floor. He started to feel uneasy now and decided it was time to leave. As he turned to leave, something caught his eye. There was a door at the end of the hallway, that he would swear hadn't been there before. He slowly approached it and opened it. On the far side of the room was a dark mound of what looked like old clothes. The mound moved slowly and what sounded like several dogs, growling all at once, came from it. Marcus turned and ran as fast as he could out of the house. He felt like something was chasing him the entire way out. He didn't stop running until he got home. He told his mom what happened. She said that wasn't a very good idea, but it was probably just a stray dog. Marcus knew what he saw and heard was not just some stray dog. He knew he had encountered something much more sinister in that old abandoned house. Something that was definitely not human. The next day at school, Marcus told the other boys that he had gone into the old house and what he saw and heard in there. They told him he had made it all up. They didn't believe he had gone in there. One of the boys said that he had been in the house several times and there wasn't a door at the end of the hall. The other boys that had been in the house agreed with him. Marcus said, "I'll prove it to you, let's all go there today after school. I'll show them that I hadn't made up anything, and that what I told them was real." When school got out, Marcus and only two of the other boys, Matt and Ryan, headed off to the old house. They walked up in front of the old house and Matt told them, "I just remembered, my mom said I had to come straight home today to get my chores done, so you guys will have to tell me about it tomorrow." Matt turned and headed back towards his own house. "I think Matt was just scared," Ryan said. "He's only ever been in the old house once before and he was really freaked out afterward." "Well, let's do it then." They both headed in. The front door would only open enough for them to just squeeze through. It was dim inside, because of the heavy curtains, mostly covering the windows. They both stood there for a minute, letting their eyes adjust, then started up the stairs. When they reached the second floor, Marcus looked to the end of the hallway and was surprised to find that there wasn't a door there. That's strange, there was most definitely a door right there, at the end of the hall. Ryan told him, "Yeah, that's what I said, I've been in here lots of times and there has never been a door there. Yesterday, I was downstairs, then I heard a noise coming from up here. I went into this room." He pointed and started walking to the room straight ahead of them. "I figured the noise had been this mirror falling and breaking." "You mean that mirror hanging on the wall?" Ryan pointed to the mirror hanging on the wall to the side. "But, it was laying on the floor, broken into pieces yesterday. I guess you made that up too." Ryan turned and headed out of the room. Marcus stared at the mirror, and the floor in front of it for a few seconds, then turned and followed him out. Just as he stepped out of the room's doorway, a loud boom, then crash, came from the room behind them. Both boys spun around instantly, then looked around the door. The mirror was laying on the floor broken into pieces just like he had seen before. "Ryan, that is exactly the same sound and the mirror is laying exactly as it was yesterday. Did you make that fall, just to try to scare me?" Ryan said with a somewhat trembling voice. "No! I swear, I didn't touch it." They both backed out of the room, then Ryan hit him on the shoulder and pointed down the hallway. There at the end of the hallway was a door, that they both agreed had not been there a few minutes ago. "The door, it just appeared, we both know that door wasn't there before, right?" Marcus asked. "What are you doing?" Ryan asked as Marcus started heading down the hallway towards the door. "I've got to see if it is in there again. The dog or whatever it was." "Come on," Marcus told him. "No way, I'm not going in there," Ryan said as he turned and ran down the stairs. Marcus slowly made his way down the hallway to the door. He put his hand on the knob, then looked back over his shoulder for a second before turning it and opening the door. A gust of wind came rushing out, blowing past him. Darkness and the same growls like a bunch of dogs all at the time, blew past him, along the hallway, then down the stairs after Ryan. He heard Ryan scream in terror, then nothing. "Ryan!" He called and started running along the hallway to the head of the stairs. He looked down, but saw no sign of Ryan, or whatever the thing was that chased him. He hurried down the stairs, and out the door. He got to the street out front of the house, but didn't see Ryan anywhere. "Ryan!" he called, but got no answer. He must have run as fast as he could straight home like I did yesterday, he thought. He quickly headed home too, and thought of what they had both just seen. "Well, now the other boys will believe us, since we both seen the same thing." He didn't mention to his mom that they had gone back to the old house. The next day, when Marcus got to school, he looked for Ryan, so they could talk about what happened at the old house the day before. In first period, Ryan wasn't there. But what was really strange, Emily was sitting at Ryan's desk. Not only that, but Sarah was sitting at Emily's desk. The more I looked around, the more I noticed, that several people were sitting at desks they didn't normally sit at. After first period, Matt came up to him in the hall. "Sorry, I left you hanging there by yourself yesterday. Did you go back in again?" "By myself?" Yeah, Ryan and I went in and it was freaky. Ryan wasn't in first period, have you seen him?" Matt looked at me with a puzzled expression. "Who is Ryan?" "Ryan. You, me, and Ryan all went to the old house together yesterday." "Dude? Did you fall and hit your head in that house yesterday?" "I don't know anybody named Ryan." "Well, I got to go, I'll catch you at lunch, later." Matt headed off to his next class. I just stood there and stared at him heading away. He doesn't know who Ryan is? He shook his head and hurried down the hall to his next class. He must be messing with me. But he wasn't, the next few classes were much the same, people sitting at the wrong desks. I brought up Ryan's name to a few different people, and got the same kind of responses that Matt gave me. Who is Ryan? Nobody knew, or remembered anything about Ryan. Except, me.
Pain seems to come from every part of my body. I sluggishly open my eye, just one eye, the other one doesn't want to open. It takes me a minute to figure out I'm in a hospital bed. I hear beeping of some kind, and voices in the distance. The only thing I could remember was driving through that dark forest at night. Now I'm here. What happened to me? I don't know, my thoughts are muddy. Someone comes up to the side of my bed. A nurse, I think. The nurse tells me that I have been in a car accident. I had hit a tree head on and was lucky to be alive. I had been unconscious for the past 3 days and had a broken arm and head trauma. So many accidents along that winding road in Elmwood Forest, she commented. She asked if I knew my name and did I remember anything. I told her yes, my name was... I knew my name but couldn't quite remember it right then. No, I don't remember the accident. She told me I was in a rental car and that there was no identification found at the accident. The rental car had been rented out to a 75-year-old woman named Linda Smith, and that couldn't be her because I appeared to be in my late 20s. I didn't remember renting a car. In fact, I couldn't remember anything at all except driving through that forest. The nurse told me not to worry about trying to remember things yet, and that some temporary memory loss was common with head trauma like I had received. Get some rest and things will start to come back to you, she told me. I dozed off and woke up sometime later when the nurse was back to check on me. Hi, how are you feeling? You were asleep for several hours. Actually, my mind is a little clearer now. I remember flying in to visit my daughter and grandkids for a while. The nurse didn't respond right away. She just stared at me for a few seconds, then finally said, Daughter and grandkids? You're only old enough to maybe have a daughter in elementary school at the oldest. You should probably rest a little bit more. Nobody will be back in to bother you again until morning. She left the room with a strange look on her face. What did she mean I was only old enough to have a daughter in elementary school? Then I remembered her saying the car was rented by an older woman and I appeared to be in my late 20s. What did she say the woman's name was? Linda? Linda Smith? That name sounded familiar, but I couldn't quite place it. I tried to go back to sleep, but my mind wouldn't shut off. Linda Smith. Who was she? Why did her name sound so familiar? The more I tried not to think about it, the more my mind kept coming back to Linda Smith. Suddenly, it hit me. There was a young woman in the middle of the road. I swerved so not to hit her. Then off the road and nothing. That was the last thing I could remember before waking up here. Why was she standing in the middle of the road just staring right at me? I was tired and didn't see her until the last second. She didn't even try to get out of the way, just stood there and her eyes were red. I remember! I can remember now! Oh my gosh, I have to tell the nurse. I fumbled for the call button that must be here on my bed somewhere. I finally found it and pressed the button. A minute later, the nurse came back in. Hi, honey, did you need something? Yes, well, I can remember now. I started to tell her that I was Linda Smith and about the accident and the girl standing in the middle of the road just staring at me. I tried, but no words would come out. What was happening? Why couldn't I say anything? Then the voice, old and raspy voice in my head.
You will only say what I want you to say from now on. This is my body. I just needed a soul to attach to. You conveniently died in that car crash, and I grabbed your soul as it tried to leave your body. You have no idea how many years I've been trying to cause deaths in that forest so that I may grab a soul. You better deal with it, honey. You and me are going to be together here for a very, very long time.
Nurse, is there a mirror I can see myself? Oh, honey, you really shouldn't worry about how you look right now. You have a lot of swelling and bruising still. Please, I asked. I need to see. The nurse shook her head but pulled a hand mirror out from the drawer and held it up for me. As I looked into the mirror, it was as I had feared. The late 20s girl the nurse said I was is the same one that had been standing in the middle of the road. One eye was swollen shut, but the open eye was gleaming red.
When I was a kid, probably around 6 or 7, I never had any friends. People often found me weird since I was a silent little girl who just loves to draw. My sketch pads was basically my best friend, and I used to sit by this big tree at the center of my school, just basically sketching things that I see, things which people don't. As every child would, we usually would abandon our pencil when it wasn't sharp enough to draw. Well, I always carried a box of them since Mom knew it was my only comfort. Mum understood what we were all going through since she was the same when she was younger. We were often called weird because we see things that other people can't. It was a typical examination day, and my classmates were already gone since their parents already picked them up. My parents worked from afar, so it wasn't really easy for them to fetch me. So I had until 5 p.m. to wait for my mom since she was a teacher. So while waiting, I was having some snacks while sitting by the tree. My sandwich was on my left hand, while my pad was on my lap. On my right hand was, of course, the pencil I was using while I was sketching. I drew one of those tiny people who laughed a lot in our backyard. They did somehow ask me to sketch them. Going back, as I was sketching, my pencil tip suddenly broke. So I took out another newly sharpened pencil from my box. My box has 10 now since I took out a new one. I placed the pencil with the broken tip beside me to my left. It wasn't there. I thought maybe it rolled off somewhere and I just ignored it. Then I broke another pencil tip again and placed it on my left, so it can be together with my other pencils. However, what happened was, my other pencil was also gone. As much as it seems like I was disposing of my pencils, I was simply gathering them since my mom will sharpen them later. So I went looking for the other 2 pencils. By this time, my sandwich was already finished. I held on to my box of pencils and left the recent one I took into place by the tree where I sat. I circled the entire place just to make sure I had no classmates around anymore. After all, it was way past the time already.
Where did my pencil go?
I said as I circled the tree once more and found none of my pencils. When I went back to my seat, I was surprised to see that even the recent one I took out went missing. So out of being annoyed, I took out the last 7 pencils and placed them on my left where I sat. I pretended as if I was sketching something and used my eyes to look at the pencils. My eyes went wide as I saw a large dark hand with long sharp nails coming out of the tree. I watched how it slowly and quietly took all of my pencils as they disappeared back into the tree. It was at that time I panicked and ran to the gate and finally decided to just wait for my mom there. My family has a curse. My grandfather used to tell an old tale of his father to my dad. According to my pops, his father had a friend living in a tree. My dad was someone who could see the paranormal, and that is passed on to our family members. Well, to my sisters, I basically could just feel or hear them, so that was one of my gifts. My grandpa lived in a rich home. They had tons of money and lived on hectares of land in the Philippines. Our ancestral home was 3 stories high, and you could say we had a lot of money. We have a Hispanic heritage, and many people thought then that all the wealth we had mainly came there. But no, it came elsewhere. My pop's dad had a friend. He was invisible to my pops, but he saw everything happen. One day, they didn't have any money on hand, and they needed cash immediately. My pops watched his father with his vintage car, empty of any objects, drove around a large tree within the property. He only took one turn around that large tree, and when he came back, bags of cash suddenly appeared in his car. It was like magic, but it wasn't. Well, the years had passed, and that wealth we once had already diminished, and along with it was a curse in exchange. That temporary wealthy life our family once had was now gone, and now we have to live with a curse. My father, aunt, cousins, my grandfather, my grandpa's younger brother, and all their family members have faced this curse. Male members of a family that carried our last name would all die before they hit 65. My dad died when he was only 56, and it was due to the same cause of death as everybody, a heart attack. All of them died of a heart attack. As for the female members, we all have a chance to break the curse. If we were to marry in church before we hit the age of 35, to officially be blessed while changing our last name, we could break free from this curse. My aunt didn't survive as she only married by law and not by the church. I actually have 2 older sisters. Currently, my oldest sister is experiencing the same symptoms as my aunt used to. Shortness of breath, nausea, everything that was obviously leading to a heart attack, despite eating healthy and sleeping well. My other sister, before she got married, had it. But after she got married in a church, her symptoms disappeared just like it was nothing but some type of flu. This is a real story in our family. A secret I am burdened to carry that no one would believe. They'd all think I was crazy for thinking this way. But currently, I am experiencing these symptoms as well. Worse of it, since I am nearing 30 and still unmarried. My dad and aunt, in their deathbed, always use their fingers like some pair of scissors to cut an invisible string in the air, saying, "Cut the curse. I must cut the curse." Right now, I need someone to help me break the curse. We are the last members carrying our last name. Well, I am the last member who has not hit 30 yet. I honestly hope I survive till then.
We dated for a few weeks before I became concerned about some of her peculiarities. She kept it mostly hidden at first, but things started to stack up after a time. It wasn't a single major issue, but rather a slew of minor ones. She took my hair, that was odd. She picked lumps of it off my brush, and I found her stuffing it into her pockets one day. When I confronted her about it, she just denied it. I was never allowed to visit her home. I noticed unusual flashes of light shining through the windows from within. She wore strange jewelry, such as upside-down crosses and pentagrams, strange, druidic motifs fashioned into necklaces and rings. I inquired whether she was into Wicca, but she looked perplexed and said she preferred comfy furniture. It wasn't those things that caused me to end my relationship with her. My friend John informed me that this other girl Jenny had a thing for me, and I always thought she was smoking attractive. I should have phoned Haley, at least to break up with her. Instead, I texted her to tell her it was over. I'll admit, I was like Joe Jonas on that part, but what can I do? I was just a teen, seeking for a more delicious dish. She contacted me 2 seconds later and fell into tears. She questioned what she had done wrong, and I assured her it wasn't her fault, it was mine. But she didn't seem any happy, and she continued questioning why I was truly splitting up with her. I became frustrated, and we ended up arguing for a long time. After minutes of bickering, I told her what I actually thought of her and why I was breaking up with her. After we hung up, I felt a piercing ache in my stomach, as if someone had driven a knife into my gut. It became worse and worse until I bent over and was down on the floor of my living room shrieking in pain. It stopped after a few long minutes, and I groaned with relief as I rose from the floor on weak legs. Haley texted me shortly after. The mail contained a photo of a bizarre handcrafted doll with wispy strands of human hair coming from its head. It had a face that looked like mine. A needle was being inserted into the doll's tummy. I started typing a message with trembling hands, pleading for her forgiveness and telling her that I didn't mean what I said. I simply needed some alone time, but she knows I'm leaving her for Jenny. I felt a burning agony in my gut, this time much worse than before. When I looked down, I saw blood flowing out and trickling to the floor, forming a puddle around my feet. Another text message arrived, this time with a photo. It was a horrendous image of the doll's large tummy gut open with a sharp knife, peeling aside the cloth to reach inside. There was blood, with chunks that looked like small organs floating in it. I felt as if a hand was reaching inside of me, yanking on things and twisting my intestines, slashing and slicing with a knife. I screamed as the feeling of blood flooded my insides and something erupted on my left side. For a few long seconds, my guts felt twisted and pulled, but suddenly the sensation ceased and I was left gasping for air again, down on my knees. I texted Haley with shaking hands, missing the buttons, and took 5 minutes to finish, but I eventually finished the message and mailed it. Please take me back! Please accept my apologies! It was all I could think about. It was the only way to get her to stop hurting me. When she came to my door, I felt a flood of comfort sweep over me since she had brought the doll with her. Maybe she did plan to fix me, I reasoned, and a hopeful grin formed at the corners of my mouth. "Thank you for coming over," I said. "So, will you take me back? Can you help me?" Haley paused for time before shaking her head. "No," she answered. "Nobody can help you. I just wanted to see this for myself." With that, she pulled a little pocket knife and proceeded to cut deep gashes vertically down the doll's face, running over the eyes and popping the tiny stitch buttons that were fastened there. She buried the blade and twisted it, sending parts of the doll flying into the air. "Not so gorgeous anymore," she muttered as blood poured from my cheeks and my eyelids burst open. "I deserve more than a breakup text."
I want to ask permission from you for our school's upcoming field trip next week. Miss Giselle says she will send a waiver to your email. As I uttered those words, I saw a sudden pain and worry in them. And they looked at each other quickly, but they immediately switched their expressions and gave warm smiles. I was thinking, maybe they were worried about our trip since I was going outside with my friends for the first time in a long while. You were going to say yes, right? I nervously asked for their approval since this was the trip that me and Samantha were dreaming of ever since we started senior high. Of course. My dad said. I sighed in relief, thanked them, and tugged them tightly as I went back to my room to do my checklist for the upcoming trip. After the lunch break, I hopped into my remaining Zoom classes with my class schedule in the afternoon. And precisely at 4:30 p.m., we were done and said goodbyes to each other. I reviewed my checklist notes and inserted some of my to-do lists. I unconsciously fell asleep at my desk while doing that and woke up at almost 10 p.m. Darkness surrounded my room, but a faint light was coming from my laptop. I honestly wondered why it was open, and I know that I shut it down after our Zoom class. I thought it was weird, but maybe I just forgot to shut it a while ago since I did fall asleep. I went over to switch on the lights first in my room. After that, I went closer to my laptop to shut it down properly. But I stopped right in my tracks when I saw my laptop screen. I was still in our Zoom class, seeing myself on the front cam. But all my classmates and even our teacher were not there, and I was the only one not leaving yet. I suddenly felt goosebumps in my skin because I found it creepy and weird. But I just shrugged it off, left Zoom, and shut down my laptop. I felt hungry since I didn't eat dinner yet, and thought that maybe my parents did not want to disturb my sleep, and that's why they never woke me up. I went to our kitchen and saw an adequately covered plate. I decided to heat it in the microwave and eat it. After dinner, I walked up again to my room, only to be surprised to see my laptop powered on again. And the creepiest part here is that it was again directed to my Zoom class. I slowly went towards it and sat across from my laptop. But my worry instantly vanished when I saw Samantha entering the Zoom. "Hey, you scared the hell out of me! Are you pranking together with our classmates?" I annoyingly asked her. I waited for her response, but she didn't talk and just looked at me straightly in the camera. "Hey guys, if you're all pranking me, this is not funny, I swear," I seriously said to her. But she remained silent. Then all of a sudden, all our classmates, including Miss Giselle, slowly entered the Zoom class, all seated in front of the camera, mimicking how Samantha sat at her poster. Everyone started to creep me out, and one by one, blood came through their mouth, which terrified me that I screamed in horror and passed out. I felt a light shake on both of my shoulders, and I opened my eyes to see both of my parents with worried faces. Then I looked at every corner in the room, and I knew I wasn't in my bedroom. I was in the hospital, that is for sure. "What am I doing here?" I asked them. "You don't remember what happened, sweetheart?" Mom asked. "I knew you wouldn't believe me," I started. "I saw all my classmates, Samantha and Miss Giselle in our Zoom class. There was blood coming out of their mouths, all of them, and I swear I am not joking." "Calm down, Mandy. We believe you. Okay, sweetheart?" Dad consoled me as he patted me on the back. "But you must face the truth and move on in life, okay?" Dad continued. What do you mean? I asked in confusion. Samantha, sweetie, your teacher, Miss Giselle, all of your classmates, they're already dead. It's been a week already, and they're dead because of the car accident. The school bus crashed during the field trip, Mandy. What? I shouted in horror. What do you mean by that? That is not true. Does it mean I am also dead, right? Because I am with them? You're kidding me. No, you are not dead. You are alive. You're just going through some post-traumatic depression because of their loss. Mom explained while tearing up. Because of this depression, you have hallucinations and visions. The doctor explained your situation to us. Dad said, "Why am I still alive? Why am I not dead?" I asked while sobbing. You don't remember? You asked your dad to drive you to your field trip location because you had a bad dream and don't want to ride the bus. What bad dream? I was starting to get too scared to ask. The bus accident, my mom said. My mom was a fine young woman who fell in love with my dad. She was beautiful, kind, smart, and almost perfect in all aspects. She could have been the best in her chosen field, but she chose to stay and support my dad. My dad, on the other hand, was a normal guy who had mediocre ambitions in life. He loved art and dreamed to become an artist someday. But he lacked talent and grit, so he stayed as a clerk for decades. I remember my parents being happy during their first few years together. Those years were golden until my dad cheated on my mom. Since then, my mom got so depressed that she denied any light bulbs in the house. Our house reeked of urine and poop, while my dad's new family enjoyed trips to Disneyland. I saw how my mother changed from sweet to bitter, then to nothing at all. She stopped going out and taking showers. She lost her friends, her relatives' affection, but not my love. I loved my mother for what she was, and for that, I hated my father for hurting her, for leaving us, and for becoming happy with someone else. Our life became stagnant chaos where home became a rancid refuge. But it was okay because I was with her, and she was with me. When I was 18, I got into an accident and I was in a coma for a year. When I woke up, all I could ever think about was my mother. Where was she? Was she fine? Who was with her? But she was alright. Even better, when I got back home, the house was spotlessly clean and bright. All the light bulbs were back and she was happy again. She would prepare sumptuous meals every day and every night. Our house was like an open banquet. For the longest time, my mom was finally happy and I am happy. But there were a few strange things that I noticed after I woke up from a coma. First, although the house was clean, it smelled of sulfur. I asked my mother about it, and she told me it was one of the cleaning agents she used. Second, my mother had darker teeth and gums, as well as black nails. I thought maybe it was because of her poor hygiene during her depressive state, so I never really asked her about it. Third, we always had meat even though she never goes out to buy some. And lastly, her smile. Her face would slightly morph into something else I am too afraid to continue looking at. But she was my mother, and I loved her. So everything's okay. That's what I thought.
This story is sponsored by Exipure. This at-home hack shrinks fat cells permanently. In 2008, researchers from the Karolinska Institute in Sweden found something amazing. That every adult human, lean or fat, man or woman, always has the same number of fat cells, around 30 billion. Fat cells are like balloons. It is not the number of fat cells that increases but the size of your fat cells. They can balloon up to 50 times their size or more to store fat.
But then in 2021 researchers uncovered a way to actually dissolve fat cells. A 750-year-old fat dissolving hack from Vietnam that forces permanent fat cell loss. And is so easy to do and works every time. 224,000 women and men use this hack every day to dissolve pounds of fat as they sleep. Exapure is unlike anything you've ever tried. Get this exclusive deal now. Click the link in the description below.
One night, she served a bloody steak and told me that it was healthier that way. I was not a fan of rare meat, but what bothered me the most was what I saw in the mashed potato. There were hair and nails, and it reeked. I looked at my mother and she was there, across the table, blissfully waiting for me to eat what she has prepared. When I tried to excuse myself, she got mad and forced me to sit still. I ended up eating all of it despite my will not to. As if some dark force entered my body and forced me to. All the while I was devouring her concoction, she was laughing hysterically and calling random names. I can still remember the sensation of gnawing on those crispy nails and fibrous hair. That night, I locked myself in my room and wondered whose nails and hair were those. As much as I want to vomit, my body would not want me to. As if something has left a clenching fist inside me and I lost all control over my body. Every day became hell as my mother would force me to eat disgusting insects and human body parts. Whose parts I did not know as my mind failed to fathom the dreadful situation I was in back then. Every night, she would visit me in my room and whisper incomprehensible words. She would sing, laugh, and cry. It was madness at its finest. Eventually, our house was stripped of its immaculate cleanliness and revealed its true nature. I was living in a dilapidated house only eating insects and dirt, with occasional raw meat on the side. It was an atrocious nightmare. I eventually got sick from all the objects that I've digested. Patrolling police found me and brought me to the hospital. I later found out that my mother died weeks after my accident. My father's new family also went missing. No one has heard of them ever since. Some said that I was enchanted by a demon. Others believed that it was my mother's pitiful soul who kept me in trance. They had to operate and remove all the nasty objects in my stomach so I could survive. Up to this day, I am not entirely sure what happened back then. But one thing is for sure. Even after her death, my mother wanted to take care of me. Even if it meant she'd asked a demon to do it on her behalf. So what happens when love fades away? Most of the time, the other person starts to feel relieved in the absence of the other. One might look for love in other places or from other people, but sometimes one stays to fulfill her promise. I still miss my mom, but that was a long time ago. I rarely talk about that story, but since you asked, would you like your steak bloody? It's healthier that way.